Question for Dan's regulars. How much of his stream is him disappearing to go drop a deuce? Because I think that's what we're doing right now. And I feel like I should be doing something, but I don't know what I'm doing when he's gone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 60-Second Car. This is the podcast that, it was just talking about music players because for some reason, people keep creating music player software to do stuff on. I think it's a good commentary into the fact that I think Daniel and I both use a program that or a software, a service that sends our podcast to all the different podcast apps because there are so many different ones. Because for some reason, everybody needs to have a podcast app so that they can run their own adware all over it, I guess. Anyway, this is the podcast that does all those things, but we also talk about the every single minute of every single movie within the Fast and the Furious franchise. My name is Dan, joined here as always by Daniel, and here's the music.
Family. Did I get it right?
You were very, very, very close. Like it honestly, it might have been the delay that is the only reason that it didn't sound right.
Dang.
But it was pretty much exactly that.
I can't hear it all. I'll take that as a win. Yeah.
I'm impressed. I am entirely impressed. However, I mean, you probably have your own little metronome in your head. That's probably pretty accurate, yeah?
Yeah, I guess. I've played in prog metal bands for a long time, and our drummer tries to tell us the counts, and I try to play by feel, so I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. And, but you got me curious because I set up our link tree, and when I put in the podcast feed for Apple Music, it decided, or Apple Podcast, whatever, it was like, oh, here's all the places it's available. And I don't know some of these at all. Sonnet, Public Radio, or Radio Public rather, Podfriend, Podcast Republic, Podcast Guru, Hero, Podcast Addict, Player FM, Castro, Bullhorn, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Castbox, and then we get into the ones I know. So if you subscribe to any of those other ones, weird, but thanks.
So I do believe that, so there's some I don't know, and it's weird, but I do believe it's because one of the outlets that it allows me to push it through might have several sub-outlets underneath it. That might be what it is, because there are several. Okay. There was a bull one. I've never heard of that. Is the pun that it's a bullhorn shouting podcasts out to the world? I feel like maybe.
Yeah, I mean, its name was Bullhorn, so.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. People come up with some strange ideas for names, but then again, I'm a person who is the worst at coming up for names. I've done so many different YouTube shows. I've done so many different ideas for shows, podcasts, everything. The one thing I cannot do is come up with a name for something.
See, I'm the opposite. I have the name, and then it's the desire that comes from there. I have like
the will to live.
I have like a dozen band names or just like stupid ideas. Like an idea that someone can have that I want to do, but I just will not find the time is the Pod Goodcast. It's a podcast about John Goodman. That Pod Goodcast. I like that name a lot. Yeah. I'm not going to do it.
John Goodman, great actor, world class.
Yeah. I say he's my second favorite actor. I've probably seen 5 of his films, but still, he's that damn good.
Do I know your first?
We have talked about him.
Is it a well-known actor?
Yes.
Danny DeVito.
It is Danny DeVito.
Is it really? Yeah. I do love Danny DeVito.
Always makes me happy. I think he's underrated when he's like being serious. Mm-hmm. Then, the deep emotional scarring from The Penguin when I was a kid. He's my guy.
That's the one thing I'm going to have trouble with. I really love Colin Farrell's Penguin, and he's got a show coming. And I remember an interview where Danny was asked, "Hey, do you like this character?" And he's like, "Oh, that's Colin Farrell. I love Colin, but my Penguin's better." And I do really love Danny DeVito's Penguin, but Colin Farrell does kill it. So, that'll be fun.
I'll watch the show, but that's where it's at.
Yeah, Danny DeVito as Oswald Cobblepot is very good. I did recently cancel a bunch of subscriptions and then started watching something I still had time on, which was Hulu. And Katie and I started watching Futurama again, which I can't get enough of that show. The show is probably my favorite show. It is hilarious, and it is still Matt Groening, which is, a goat of all sorts. And but also on Hulu is Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where we have so many different seasons that we've never seen before. But we started watching season 8 because I was like, this might be near the beginning of where I kind of stopped watching for a while. And every episode is just amazing. Danny DeVito. I mean, he's just so good. And Charlie Day. Both of them together are just genius.
I love that, like, Danny DeVito this is below him. Like, let's be real. But, like, he goes for it in every Frank Reynolds thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in physical humor, too, because I do believe there is a scene where he is upside down in a trunk in one of these episodes. And I was like, oh, that's somebody else with either really short legs but it's definitely a person, whatever. And then they don't cut. They just flip him out of it. And it's Danny DeVito. And I'm like, well, there's no cut here, so there's something that was either tricked or he's sitting upside down for like a good minute, and he's just dedicated to the craft, I guess. He's just into it. He also seems like he really loves that role.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us for Dan and Dan on Danny.
A mini podcast that almost became a real podcast. I'm down to do that. But otherwise, Fast and the Furious, whatever. It's important and stuff. We can talk about that if we want.
The craziest thing is, I want to tell you that. Where the fuck did I leave off? At the last moment, Frank also decides it is better to take the keys and escape to Mexico than turn himself in and somehow find a future with Connie. So that is the latest sentence of the synopsis of the 1954 Fast and Furious. Guys, we have one more sentence left in that synopsis, and you will know the entire plot according to Wikipedia. Don't go read it on your own. I will help you next time we do this live.
What? Oh, that just leads me to really wonder, after listening to all your synopsis reads so far, is somebody so enthralled by the story that they might go spoil it for themselves before you read the last sentence? Do you think that's a thing? They can't wait 3 days?
I will tease it with 4 words. The movie ends with...
Wait, 4 words of like the last sentence? That's like most of the sentence.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. All right. Well, there you go. Well,
sorry, the fifth word is credits. The movie ends with credits. No, that's not what it says. But what if it does?
The movie ends with credits. Speaking of, is that the end of a movie, or is that past the end of the movie? The credits.
Oh. So
did I put him in a trance?
Sometimes you go on these little things where I just kind of get lost and I just let you go, and I thought there was going to be more.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I would say, for our sake and what we're doing here, maybe the credits aren't the movie. Because I mean, we could talk about like the songs that play over them, because some of those songs, that's like in film, that's where some of your Grammy nominations come from. People make songs for movies to get nominated, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So there's something to talk about there. But no offense to everyone who worked very hard in these films. That's, 10 minutes of film of scrolling text, and who wants to listen to that? Who wants to talk about that? God, should we cut 100 minutes of our journey by not doing the credits? Unless it's the, post-credit scenes?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next, which is, are post-credits part of the movie, or are they technically trailers for the next
movie? Maybe the post-credit scenes, no matter what they are, no matter how long they are, they should be their own minute or their own episode. Because usually it's like, especially an X, not going to dive into what there is post-credits if you've not listened to the episode. That itself could be its own episode, whether or not it's a minute or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think the X ones are well over a minute, right? I mean, and then there's like, so there's one that I'm thinking of. I believe it's the Letty one, where they walk for like almost a minute. they walk through a hallway for like a little bit.
I'll talk about the pain on the hallway. I don't give a fuck. That'll be
Sure,
a minute.
yeah. Talk about the lighting and how it's dark and ominous, and nobody should be working here because it's a safety hazard.
Yeah, that place never well lit.
No, absolutely not.
I've had many conversations with office ergonomics peoples, and they would be like, "No, guys, this is not okay."
No, too many OSHA violations, too many safety problems. We don't want to get sued, especially if it's a government entity, or maybe no, the agency isn't a government entity, right?
Dude, I cannot keep track of who's government, who's not, because it's whatever. It's all fiction. Who cares?
Anyway, minute 11. We are back in the shop, right? We've just said NOS for the first time in this franchise. Yes.
You made me realize something, because in the last episode you're talking about a tracking shot that takes you to the back of the shop.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a minute, and then this next shot is going to take us back to the front of the shop.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's like they made it for us, because we're about to go back forward the way we came in. Wow.
Yes, this doesn't take a whole minute to go back, though. We do jump into something else. However, yes, it is very obvious if you've ever worked on any type of film set, or you've even seen a film set, you know that they use the exact same track, or at least a similar track, that they used to go backwards into the back of the shop to then go forward. They just recycled it or redid it. Granted, it all flows very smoothly, it seems. They do take a couple different angles. There's an angle where they're looking at an object, which we'll get to in a second, from a different angle. So whatever. It works. But like I said, I do feel like this shop was maybe a bit smaller than it seemed to the naked eye, just because of how much they were squeezing behind objects. Either that, or some of these fixtures and things that they didn't want to move because maybe this was an actual operating shop and they just took it over for the day. But yeah, let's go to it. I mean, speaking of that, we'll go right in. We're at the point where Paul is walking back to the beginning of the shop after he says, "I need NOS," and now he's leading Harry as Harry is following, like kind of like one of the, like in a movie, like the assistant that's just running around saying, hey boss, don't do that. Hey, can we stop for a second? Hey boss. Because he's in his face in this shot. Yeah. This is where he's saying, you got a heavy foot. Amateurs don't use NOS or nitrous oxide. Amateurs don't use nitrous oxide, which technically, which actually gives him a lot of, I guess, car cred to maybe the car people who watch this movie, because the car people do get a little irritated by calling all nitrous oxide in these movies NOS, because they're like, that's just a brand.
Sure. But also that tells me that everyone in this franchise, they're all amateurs. Because they love their little NOS.
I guess. Yeah, so like, I guess no, pro doesn't really matter until you're on a racetrack, I guess. You're not a pro until you're racing on a racetrack, and even then you can still be an amateur. I don't know exactly what he's talking about when he's considering pro versus non-pro, because I don't know, do pros use nitrous oxide? I guess they do. Again, not a car guy, so maybe they do.
Is illegal street racing pro?
It's for money. Does that matter?
I guess.
I mean, what is pro these days? I'm technically a pro gamer, but only because sometimes there's payment involved.
I have sold songs via Bandcamp, but I don't consider myself a professional musician.
I think you are. I would say. You've got way too much equipment where I would call you an amateur.
Look, we don't talk about how much equipment I have. Yeah, that's the one.
Addiction, possibly. I don't have a whole lot of instruments. I do have a lot of recording equipment because of, podcasting and streaming and stuff like that. But I mean, so does every single person in Los Angeles. So I guess there's that too.
Want to see one of my favorite instruments?
Yes. Is the mandolin?
Banana shaker.
Oh. I love a banana shaker. That
I also have lemon, orange, and apple.
no lime. Oh yeah, no lime. You gotta have a lime. I guess a lemon's kind of a yellow lime, right?
Wow.
They don't taste the same, but they're similar. Whoa, dude. I mean, you have one of those professional guitar racks. You could just be one of those guys that just hangs them up all over the place, or you can have one that looks like you can pull it on the stage and switch guitars between songs, like I've seen the pros do.
I think that's coming. One of our guitarists is looking into a second guitar, which means I can have two basses now.
There you go. Yeah. So, I mean, we know our stuff, and that makes us. Yeah, I don't know the line. I think the line between amateur and professional has changed a lot since since consumer audio became basically a similar level to professional material in conflict. But the fact they're doing it on the streets, I think, is what I would say is always going to be amateur. But then we have a line later that makes it seem like everybody watching this movie is amateur because we have no idea what the heck Dom is talking about when he we'll mention it later, but I'll still say it because it's a great line, is granny shifting, not double clutching like you should, which is where for a lot of people who don't know cars, probably think that's a real thing. Everybody I've watched respond to this movie who do know cars also don't know what the hell he's talking about.
Great. I was waiting to be like, this is something I don't know. I'm about to learn something. Nope, great.
Nope.
Into it.
You learned that it doesn't mean anything because most professional drivers will sit there going, what? What is he talking about? But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, back to the movie. He's weirdly in his face, and Brian is focused on this big old tank of NOS because for some reason he's able to just get away with saying, I need one of these. I need one of these big ones. No, make it 2.
So I have a question because again, like
I don't know if I have an answer.
Well, you probably do. So like I said, I have not rewatched this entire movie yet. I'm a little ahead of our recordings, but I am not that far. So if someone's watching this for the first time, in this minute, do they know that Brian is a cop? And do they know that Harry is basically under the cop's thumb? No, right?
Correct.
So if you're watching this for the first time, you think that Brian is just blowing off his boss right now for some weird reason, completely ignoring and getting reprimanded for fucking with the best customer the store has. And it's so weird to consider it from that angle. Cause like, again, right now I'm kind of putting myself in that headspace, and Brian is just like ogling this NOS so hard. His boss is like, you're almost fired. You're getting out of here. You're fucking up my whole business, and just not give him the time of the day.
Yeah.
Knowing what we know later, that Harry's like a pawn in all this stuff, sure, it all makes sense why he's completely blowing off this guy yelling at him. But like, if you're watching the first, this is not a proper reaction, but shout out to NOS, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they don't reveal he's a cop until another like maybe 10 minutes, maybe more.
Is it after the first big race?
It's after the first big race, yeah. And so that's a while. We got a while to go before we find out he's a cop. And I mean, there's kind of a fourth wall break with them revealing it before they actually reveal it, where the cop smirks. His boss detective smirks at the camera essentially. But yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm trying to so the whole time you were saying that, I was trying to remember what I was thinking. I was young, so who knows if I even caught on, but I was trying to figure out what I was thinking when this was going down, because yeah, we have no idea why he's able to just get away with this, especially not only just being an employee, but the new employee.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know.
That's what's craziest to me. This guy, like I said, is on probation probably at his new job, and just like, nah, give me NOS. Yeah, I almost got fired. Yeah, great. Give me NOS.
Yeah, it almost like, I think nowadays, if I saw this for the first time, I'd probably think he is like has sort of not necessarily a gambling problem, but a similar like gambling problem where he's just putting this all on a tab somewhere, and it's like, obviously I'll pay this off at some point. Just like, because I've known enough people in my life who get a job at a place they really like to shop at, or whatever it might be, and then essentially blow like their first 3 or 4 paychecks on just buying stuff from the store at their employee discount. So it's possible. Like I might think something like this. I might think he's a cop going after them. We do know that somebody's doing something illegal, right? That's the first scene of the movie. So I think it could be guessed that Brian is investigating them in some capacity. But yeah, in this context of us taking it a minute at a time, I think it's pretty easy to get confused here.
Yes. All right, so are we on to the next screenshot or next little bit? Because this thing, he wants NOS, he wants 2 NOS, then it's the next day, and we're at this weird abandoned warehouse thing in the daytime, and we're about to get another trademark time passes.
I am near 100% positive that this was all done on the Warner Brothers, or the Universal lot. I guess, are they the same lot? I don't know. Because we have this pretty cool transition, which we have, I think, a needle drop at this point.
It's coming up. I have the next day, some warehouse, Say Ah by the Chipminkos.
Yeah.
Chipminkos.
So I think this is where this is happening in this scene, because this is where it starts, because we see the transition from day to night here. Right? Same shot. We have
our first car party, yeah.
Yeah, and then everybody's rolling up. We finally see the return of our green Brian Spillner vehicle. And
wait.
What's up?
Does his car, is this just reflections off the car, or does it have green lights underneath it as well?
It has green lights underneath it.
Oh,
I guess this is the first time we see that, huh? Yeah, this is the first time we see that. Yes, he has green lights underneath.
Because the heist, that's like a whole thing with the heist cars being like kind of incognito, but also glowing green.
Yeah.
So, is he one of them?
Yeah.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, I guess there is a little bit of a thing there. As we know, this car doesn't last very long, but here, this is where we finally see the return of Brian's car. And the reason I say this might be on a lot is because in the next scene, none of this looks like it's in place of us. This doesn't look like it's in a city. This looks like it's out. These are buildings out in the middle of nowhere with nothing inside, looking like they're possibly out to have nukes tested on them. Those buildings. It doesn't.
Absolutely.
It looks weird. It looks very unnerving and strange and doesn't make any sense. But here's where we pull up to our first, meetup spot, because as we know, this isn't any spot of any real importance, right?
Right. And we have another needle drop. We have perhaps the one I've been looking forward to the most in this franchise, or this movie so far. We have Rollin' by Limp Bizkit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
which is funny because there's only these 3 frames is that first needle drop, and then this next frame here is within the same minute a second needle drop.
Yeah, it's very weird. Like, they don't give Say Ah by Chipminkos much airplay to immediately go to the song that says Rollin' in it, which is also funny because cars be rolling.
And the actual name of the song is a vehicle, right?
Yeah. But yeah, so the song plays and you're kind of getting a new glimpse about what the car culture is here, and everyone here seems to just be looking at engines and shining them. So as a car ignorant person, what are people doing here and why at this exact moment? Is this what do you have under your hood? I've got this.
Yeah, so I think in my very little experience of car meetups and car shows, what
car meetups have you had?
Have I been to? I've been to a couple, actually.
No, you said car meetup. So are you meeting in the back alley to do a race or something? Is there
No. Here's the funny part. People just meet up and park their cars and then walk around and look at other people's cars. That's the whole thing.
What?
Yeah.
And you've done these?
I've been to them. I haven't done them with any of my vehicles, but I've had friends who have had vehicles that they worked on. In fact, I saw pictures of rather recently, within the last couple of weeks, where a bunch of I think Nissan Z's all met up in a parking lot somewhere, and they kind of look like the alien cars. But Nissan Z's all came together, and it's a camaraderie thing, I think, when it comes to it, because a lot of car meets are similar cars together. But I've been to Reno a few times for something called Street Vibrations, which is a motorcycle meetup. However, they also do a lot of like classic American cars and a classic like mostly domestic type vehicles, where they'll literally just park them on the street. I've seen like, old Corvettes, I've seen Bel Airs, I've seen Impalas, I've seen all kinds of stuff like that. And yeah, people literally just show off their cars. That's what they do. I mean, they're art pieces to them, right? So that's pretty much what this is.
So I imagine you in a back alley doing this kind of thing.
Sure.
But you reminded me that I grew up in Woodland, California for dinner, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, for a long time when I was growing up, we had something called Hot August Nights, when people would just cruise Main Street and show off their cars, which was all well and good until people started like flashing gang stuff and people started getting shot and beat up. So those don't happen anymore. But there was a time when I guess I was being dragged to these, because I've never been a car person, but my mom can look at a car and tell you what year, make, model, all that good stuff. And then my dad can like identify them by sound. It's very weird superpowers that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, like there's a lot of, I've met people who are like, I can tell what the car is by the taillights, or you can tell that there's a cop car behind you in the dark based on their driving lights or whatever it might be and stuff like that.
I can tell you which way they're going.
Yeah, I could do that. I could tell you that they're on, probably. Maybe. Some I guess you could turn lights on in most vehicles without the car being on. But anyway, I can tell you whether they or not they have a headlight out.
This guy. Yeah, I get it.
But yeah, I mean, car meets are, I think, still extremely popular. In fact, I think there's sort of a resurgence of gas vehicles being extremely popular, because there's so many people who are adamantly against electric vehicles. So much so that they are putting more and more effort and money into making their gas vehicles very powerful and strong and whatever and fancy.
Cute.
So we see a lot of those. In fact, I think there's a lot of gatekeeping behind a lot of these car meets, and saying that like your car has to be a gas vehicle in order to even show up here. So, there's a lot of that. And when it comes to certain things, I mean, speaking of like, gang signs and trouble and stuff like that, we have a lot of people who have been caught smuggling like drugs and stuff like that in really, really nice cars, and that's kind of just what they do. Obviously, there's been other more incognito methods, but I think it's a very popular thing to do. Or just, get a bunch of money because you're either selling a bunch of drugs or just rich, and somehow just pouring that into buying cars and whatnot. So there's crossover for a lot of those things. I know that like there's a lot of racism in people buying cars like this and stuff like that. There's a lot of like, oh man, all these people are buying all these cars, and that means I can't buy my own because I want that and stuff like that. I've heard that from friends' fathers before. That's fun. But yeah, I mean, I would say that car meets were very popular at movie theaters when this movie came out. I think there were people like in dozens at the back of the back of parking lots, coming like hours early before they go see the movie. This brought this back to life, I think, for a lot of ways. This was a huge for just the car community, even if the movie didn't do anything necessarily correct.
I mean, what was it before this? Grease?
Yeah, I guess. What else
There's
would there
probably
been?
some car movie, but I don't know it.
Yeah, I have no idea. Not anything that like showed off like how fancy your car was or how much work and effort you put into your car. I think there were a lot
Batmobile.
The Batmobile. Yeah. And we do see those a lot at car meets too. We see Batmobiles and Kit and the life cars and stuff like that. We see Ghostbusters vehicles at a lot of these car meets too, I think. If you live in Los Angeles and you go down any of the popular streets, you'll see people just driving just to show off their cars. Lots of Lamborghinis you see driving up and down like Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset or whatever it might be, just because they have it and they can. Quite literally.
We live such very different lives. Where I'm at, it's literally like Bike City, USA, and there is a guy who rides around on a penny farthing, but he's rigged it so it's backwards, and that's the guy who's going up and down the street revving his engine, kind of deal.
Gotcha. For those wondering what the heck Daniel just said, if I understand correctly, that's the not the bicycle, it's a tricycle, right? With one giant wheel?
It's a two-wheeled bike that has one giant wheel in the front, but this guy turned the seat around and put the handles on the other side, so it's a big wheel in the back, tiny wheel in the front.
Oh man, I would be worried about flipping forward so often.
Best part, the guy has a tattoo of himself riding this bike on his calf. I love this place.
Not many people get tattoos of themselves, right?
So if you look up hashtag Little Daniel Does USA on Instagram, you will find let me finish. You will find a doll that looks just like me that my now wife made when we first started dating, that we take on every trip we go on.
Oh, I didn't know she made that.
I'm this close to getting a tattoo of him on me. Which
that's not you.
But that would be me on. It would be a version of me on me.
Nah.
He's my voodoo doll, essentially.
It's like no, but that's like it's like a representation of you. There's a layer removed. I think it's different.
What is a tattoo but a representation of something?
Well, but with it's a representation of a representation, so there's another layer.
Okay, fine.
I don't think it's that weird.
I'm like Shrek.
You got layers. You got like onions.
I've got layers.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. I guess if I were, I don't know. I don't do tattoos. I want tattoos. I want some of them, but like, I don't know if I have that commitment. I'm weird. I know I'm not that weird. I know there's a lot of people that think that way too, but that is something I don't know what I would do. I don't know how I feel about that. Either way, like, I'd have no problem with it, with getting a tattoo of like me on a bike, but like at the same time, it's me on a bike. Also, it's a tattoo. Both things are weird to me.
I think after I got my like second tattoo, I am now open to just dumb shit putting on my body, because like my first one was kind of like a tribute to my parents, but also my love of like the Super Mario franchise. And my last one I got was Ralph Wiggum riding Blinky the fish. So somehow we got there between like odes to my wife and my cat and other stuff. Now I'm just like cartoons on cartoons, and I'm about to get a version of me or a Farfetch'd and other stuff. So like now that the floodgates are open, it's like, I've got real estate. It's whatever. That's
what I've heard, is like once you start, everything is a totally different mindset.
Yeah.
So, okay. We got to talk about Farfetch'd. Is that your favorite Pokemon?
Yeah, it is.
Is there a reason? Is there like a big reason for that? Or just, you're like, that's cute as hell?
I think it's cute as hell. I like that he has a little leak.
Yeah. Do you like Surfetch'd?
Actually, on the back of my phone, I have a Surfetch'd Pokemon card that I got for 50 cents at the card shop across the street.
Nice.
And I don't play the game. I got whatever Sword or Shield, because whichever one he's in for him.
He's in Shield? I think. I forget.
Don't remember.
He might be in. He's not in both, right? I don't know. He's an exclusive one?
I don't think so. I think he's a version specific one, and he was the reason I got that one.
Yeah. And then you have Corviknight, which I think is the other one, or maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, I have a whole plethora of Sword and Shield and just regular Pokemon cards. If I probably have some Farfetch'd and some Surfetch'd. I will find those and collect those for you, and you can have them all.
Put them in the envelope with the Han card.
Yeah, I will put them all together. Or Han
cards.
Yes, I will put them all together, and they are all yours. But also, speaking of Super Mario love and the Fast and the Furious, we can go see in person objects and things together at the same place. And we need to do that soon. We need to go record pieces of a live podcast at Universal Studios, where they also have the Super Mario Land.
Have you been yet? I'm assuming no.
I have not been to the Nintendo Land, no.
Okay. The other day I sent you a Reddit link to the cars that are currently living at Universal.
Oh,
Or I
right.
tried to.
So yeah, curiously, did that didn't say how long they'd be there for, right?
I mean, it was photos of someone who went. That's all I knew.
Because I know they have those cars, then they're just touring them, and they also don't really care what happens to them because, for the most part, they're not really worth much other than memorabilia. So, yeah, who knows? I would like to go see them. I would like to go. I would like to spend 30 minutes in a in one of the vehicles if we could, just talking into a phone microphone or something, recording the podcast. I think we can get away with it. I don't know about you. I think we can
be sneaky about it.
Yeah.
Just like huddle up in the back seat below the window line. Just like, yeah, so anyway, in this minute, the cars are meeting in the back. It's pretty great. They'll look really loud.
They do. And yeah, there's actually some really funny things about those cars too. Is like a lot of the things that we see on the outside of the cars, like the hood scoops going through the hood itself, and like some of the spinny belts parts that stick out of the front of the hoods and whatnot. Those are all like electric motor fake things that happen, and they're not actually part of the cars, which I find interesting. And I find if I was more engineer minded and maybe more handy, I think that would be a dream job of mine. Is just to make movie props like that. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, seems pretty sick.
I think that'd be pretty awesome. Did I hear a cat?
No, I just realized I left my window open, and my neighbors have a couple kids who
Gotcha.
are otherwise nice but like to yell. So I think it was them.
Gotcha. But yeah, I mean, I think we need to do that, and we need to do that soon.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to go when it's super hot outside, though. That's the one thing I'm worried about. But yeah, I mean, we're so car meets. The reason we're talking about all this stuff, by the way, if anybody's listening, there's not a whole lot that happens in this scene, in this minute.
No, I mean, we've got the best part about is the needle drops, and we're about to have some cool shit happen. But like, this is laying the groundwork for something neat next time.
We have a little scene here where the dude who this is probably his car, honestly. He's holding his hydraulic pump or button that is literally, as we can see, tubed into near the driver's seat, where he lets down the hydraulics that the car is on, and then comes out, and they just like very politely smile at Brian. He's just like, they go, "What's up?" And that's it. And then that's when Brian gets out of the car and is about to meet some very fun and important characters.
Yeah.
And
I'm very excited for one of the character meets in the next episode.
Yes. We meet two characters that I think are honestly big pieces of this movie in maybe some of the most unexpected ways. I think they're like, as we've talked about, one of these characters was part of the marketing for this movie for some reason, even though I think he's only really in this scene that will span a few minutes, but really only in this scene. And then another character who is just kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So is that it for this minute?
I think that's it for this minute. I got nothing else. Do you have anything?
I don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is minute 11. This is minute 10:00 to 11:00. Like I said, there's not much going on, but this is where, like, I think if you're watching this for the first time, this is where you're starting to get excited. You're like, oh, car stuff's happening. We're about to see something pretty cool. But with that being said, as always, you can catch us doing this live on twitch.tv/Danotage every Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on the schedule. I think the main day that we're trying to do is Tuesdays, but a lot of what we had going on, we shouldn't even talk about. You know what? We got a couple more minutes. I'm going to talk about this.
All right.
The reason we're doing this on Wednesday is because last night I got to see Ron Funches, who is an amazing comedian, who essentially booked a social club room that had a bar in the back, was just a bunch of chairs and couches around, which were way too many people. We had to stand the whole time. But he just booked this place and said, hey, as long as you RSVP, it's all free. You got to pay for your drinks, which were very expensive. But just come on by and I'm going to work on my hour pretty much, or at least pieces of his hour. He was just working on certain jokes he was setting up, and he's like, I got to punch some of these things up. I got to talk about, some of these things are probably not going to make the hour. It was called an intimate evening with Ron, and it was pretty intimate because it was a lot of his next hour is probably going to be a lot about his divorce that's going on right now, and his life just in general, which I'm sure he's always done in his stand-up. But for those who don't know, Ron Funches is a comedian that I've looked up to for a very long time, and is somebody who has been on my podcast before. And I think that since we've seen him grow so much, it's a pretty cool thing to see where he's at now, because when we first met, he was doing he was doing a show at Cobb's in Sacramento, and I was just like, hey, I heard you on I think it was like a Chris Hardwick "These Are Comedians to Look Out For" show that he just released out in his podcast. And it was like every comedian that he wanted to show off did like 5 minutes. That's where I heard of him, so it was obviously, very effective. And then I went and saw him at Cobb's because he was coming by, and it wasn't a huge crowd. There was like 10 of us in the room, and he was doing like 3 nights like most people do. But I went the first day, which was a Thursday, and the club owner or the club manager or something like that was like, hey, do you want to come tomorrow? And do you have any friends? And he handed me like 20 tickets. He's like, here's a handful of tickets. They can all get in for free. They got to buy drinks, obviously, but there's 20 tickets. Bring all your friends, and we'll have a thing going. And so that's what I did. I didn't bring 20, but I brought 10 friends. They all got drunk. I sat there and watched it. We had like this whole table to ourselves, and we laughed at all his jokes, and he seemed to be super appreciative because he, like I said, he was not just getting started, but he was getting started in like touring and stuff like that. And after the show, he's like, you guys are my rock. You guys were laughing at everything. It was great. And then eventually he came back to town to do like a college show or something like that. And before the show, I was like, hey, can we record a couple of things and chill for a little bit? And that's where we talked about video games. I mean, he streams here on Twitch pretty often. As we talked about video games, we talked about music and comedy and all kinds of stuff. And now he's in TV shows, and he's in Adventure Time, and he's voices of all sorts of people. He's King Shark in the Harley Quinn cartoon and all kinds of stuff. So it was a super, super cool moment to just be able to see him doing his thing and have the power to just be like, I'm just going to bring a whole bunch of people that are awesome to a place and watch me work out my stuff, instead of doing it like normal people do, which is go on tour and do all this crap.
So that reminds me, that college gig you invited me to.
Yeah.
As a guest, I don't know. I'm not sure if I was supposed to be a talking head on your podcast, but I had a microphone.
Yeah.
And seeing you do what you're doing with Ron, I basically sat there silently. And Ron eventually commented on me being there and thought I was high as hell, which I was not. So that was a really cool night for me. And like just seeing him basically side stage was very interesting. But a weird way that connects to something later in my life is the opening act on that night was Keith Lowell Jensen.
Yes.
Who's a Sacramento regular guy. He's put out a bunch of albums, a couple books. He had a podcast for a while with Johnny Taylor Jr.
He was also there.
And who was looking for a new producer to produce her podcast. So I sat in on an episode. Johnny wasn't there. And before we started recording, I was talking to Keith and the guy who basically I was set to replace. And we were talking. I was like, yeah, so I actually met you like years and years ago at Sac State when you were opening for Ron Funches. He went, holy shit, you were the guy with the podcast. I was like, I was the other guy at the podcast. But yeah, he's like, dude, we got kicked off of Sac State after that show. I was like, what happened? Apparently right after the show, they went out back on that like little stage behind the auditorium and they started smoking weed. And that's a no-no on Sac State. And I think judging by when it wasn't super legal then either. So they got kicked out of Sac State after performing this free show for the college kids in the most Ron Funches way. So, But yeah, I guess I felt like he was a little annoyed that we were there because, the backstage comedy camaraderie stuff, and he's recording a podcast, and he was sat in the room with us, silent as I was.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wound up not taking that gig, and that podcast died. So my bad.
Wow.
But yeah, I've since seen Ron Funches at Outside Lands.
Oh.
They had a music or a comedy stage, and it was a weird kind of variety show in the afternoon, and I saw him do 15 minutes after Jen Kirkman, maybe? Or Rory Scoville, one of those two. But yeah, super stoked to see him getting big, and he should be bigger. He's a lot of fun. Yeah, Ron Funches.
Yeah, definitely one of those guys that I think has not only been working very hard, but has also just been kind of snubbed by the industry in a lot of ways. And I think that he's a success story of keep trying, because he was somebody, and I think he talks about this in his first like big special. He was somebody who was turned away by Netflix like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, and their quotes were basically, "We just don't see you as an hour long guy." And so he signed to do a special with Comedy Central, and then ever since has gotten so many gigs and so many big things. And he's definitely, he came from, like a lot of comedians came from very much nothing, and he's got his own weird life going on. I don't pretend to know what's happening there. But yeah, I actually didn't know that story that you had from that night. And if he didn't like us doing that podcast there, I mean, that's on him, because that was kind of Ron's idea. So
Ron did, Keith, I guess, didn't, but
no, it was Ron's idea. I was like, hey, you want to do something like either, whenever, before, after? He's like, I'm just going to be chilling in the back. You want to just come do it then? I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then I just brought my stuff, and we're there with my friend Terry, who I did a podcast with for a while. The Dan Sucks podcast, which is no longer live anywhere. I have the first episode with Janet Varney and Ashley Birch on YouTube. But I gotta find I do have the archives somewhere, and maybe I'll upload them again at some point. But yeah, that is a cool little history that kind of came to a pretty big head last night, because I think he had just a bunch of his friends there. There were a bunch of people who have been supporting him for years there. And we all got to hang out and watch him work out. And that was a
cute,
fun little moment. But yeah, that's minute 11, I guess, this podcast. But I thought it was important to talk about, so I wanted to put it in there, because as I do every single podcast, these podcasts are barely about the topic. They're more about just having a good time. So with that, make sure to follow us on all the platforms, follow our link tree, email us at 60secondcar@gmail.com. And with that, I'll see you later.
Family.